The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and regret, a heady mix that clung to the air as I stood frozen, my back against the cold granite counter. Gabriel Torres, my best friend's dad, loomed closer, his broad shoulders blocking the light from the pendant bulbs overhead. His eyes, usually steady and kind, burned with something unspoken, pinning me in place like a moth under glass. I was 24, still figuring out who I was, and definitely not supposed to be here. Not like this, not with him. Gabriel was 45, a single dad with a life carved out of hard work and quiet strength, raising my best friend, Mateo, in this craftsman-style house in Portland, Oregon. I'd known them both since I moved to this rainy city 4 years ago, a transplant from a small Ohio town, chasing a life where I could be myself. Mateo, with his infectious laugh and knack for dragging me into his schemes, had become my anchor. But Gabriel, he was the storm I hadn't seen coming. "Elliot," he said, his voice low, rough like gravel. "We need to talk." My heart slammed against my ribs. I'd been coming over to this house for years. Game nights, barbecues, lazy Sundays watching Mateo tinker with his guitar. Gabriel was always there, a steady presence, offering quiet smiles or a beer from the fridge. But lately, those smiles lingered too long, and his hand brushed mine when he passed the salt. I told myself it was nothing. I was Mateo's friend, the kid who'd shown up with a duffel bag and a dream of belonging. Gabriel was off limits, a line I'd never cross. Until tonight. It started innocently enough. Mateo had invited me over to bake cookies for a fundraiser at the community center where he volunteered. "You're hopeless in the kitchen," he teased, tossing me an apron. "But you can at least stir." We'd laughed, flour dusting our clothes, until Mateo got a call from his girlfriend, Lena, and bolted out the door with a promise to be back in an hour. That left me alone with Gabriel, who'd been chopping wood in the backyard and wandered in, sleeves rolled up, sweat clinging to his temples. "You're making a mess," he'd said, nodding at the flour on my shirt. His tone was light, but his gaze wasn't. I laughed it off, turning to the mixing bowl, but he stepped closer, reaching for a dish towel. "Here," he said, brushing it against my sleeve. His fingers grazed my arm, and the air shifted, heavy with something neither of us could name. Now, here we were, inches apart in this kitchen that suddenly felt too small. "Talk about what?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to step back, to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "You know what? I did. God, I did." The late-night conversations when Mateo was asleep, the way he'd ask about my art, my dreams, like he actually cared. The time he'd fixed my bike tire in the garage, his hands steady and sure, while I rambled nervously about nothing. Every moment had built to this, a tightrope we'd both been walking, pretending we wouldn't fall. "Gabriel, this is..." I started, but he cut me off. "Don't," he said, stepping closer still. His hand hovered near mine on the counter, not touching, but close enough that I felt the heat of him. "Don't say it's wrong. Not yet." My breath caught. Wrong? Of course it was. He was Mateo's dad. He was 21 years older than me, a man who'd built a life while I was still piecing mine together. But the way he looked at me, like I was more than the kid who tagged along with his son, made my chest ache with something I hadn't felt in years. Want, need, the kind of longing that could ruin everything. The back door creaked, and we both froze. Mateo's voice called out, "Yo, Elliot, you burned the cookies yet?" Gabriel stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. I turned to the bowl, my hands shaking as I stirred, pretending nothing had happened. But something had, and I knew, as Gabriel's eyes met mine one last time before he left the room, that nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, I woke up in my tiny apartment in southeast Portland, the memory of Gabriel's voice still echoing in my head. I'd barely slept, replaying that moment in the kitchen, the way his presence filled the space, the way I'd wanted to close the distance between us. I told myself to forget it, to focus on my job at the art supply store, on my sketches, on anything but him. But when Mateo texted me to come over for dinner, I didn't hesitate. The Torres house was a haven, all warm wood and mismatched furniture, a stark contrast to the sterile rentals I'd grown up in. Mateo was sprawled on the couch, strumming his guitar, when I arrived. "Dad's making his famous chili," he said, grinning. "You're in for a treat." Gabriel was in the kitchen again, stirring a pot on the stove. He glanced up as I walked in, and for a split second, the air crackled. "Elliot," he said, his voice neutral but his eyes anything but. "Grab a beer from the fridge." I did, my fingers brushing his as I handed him one. Mateo didn't notice, too busy scrolling through his phone, but I felt it, the spark, the danger. Dinner was torture, sitting across from Gabriel, trying to act normal while Mateo rambled about the fundraiser. Every time Gabriel spoke, his voice was a low hum that settled in my bones. After dinner, Mateo dragged me to the garage to help him fix a speaker for the community center. "You're good with your hands," he said, tossing me a screwdriver. I laughed, but my mind was still in the kitchen, still with Gabriel. When Mateo stepped out to take another call from Lena, I wandered back inside, telling myself I was just grabbing water. Gabriel was at the sink washing dishes. He didn't turn around, but he knew I was there. "You're avoiding me," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm not." I lied, my heart racing. I don't know what this is." He dried his hands and faced me, his expression unreadable. "Neither do I. But I can't stop thinking about you." The confession hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I took a step closer, drawn to him like gravity. His hand reached out, tentative, brushing my wrist. It was barely a touch, but it set my skin on fire. "We can't," I whispered, even as I leaned into him. "I know," he said, but he didn't move away. The sound of Mateo's footsteps broke the spell. I stepped back, my face burning, and grabbed a glass from the cabinet, pretending to fill it with water. Gabriel turned back to the sink, his shoulders tense. Mateo burst in, oblivious, talking about the speaker. But I could feel Gabriel's eyes on me, and I knew we were running out of time to pretend this wasn't happening. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. I'd always known I was gay, but coming out in Ohio had been a battle. Whispers in school, my parents' disappointed silence. Portland was supposed to be my fresh start, a place where I could be free. But falling for Gabriel? That was a complication I hadn't planned for. He was everything I wasn't, grounded, sure of himself, a man who'd built a life for his son after his wife left when Mateo was a kid. I was just Elliot Harper, the guy who sold paintbrushes by day and sketched by night, hoping one day to make something of myself. What could I possibly offer someone like Gabriel? But the way he looked at me, the way he saw me, made me feel like I was enough. And that scared me more than anything. The next day, I went to the community center to help Mateo set up for the fundraiser. The place was buzzing, volunteers hanging rainbow banners, kids running around, music blasting. Gabriel was there too, hauling tables and joking with the organizers. He fit here in this diverse, vibrant community in a way I was still learning to. When he caught my eye across the room, he nodded toward the back door. My pulse spiked, but I followed him outside to the alley, where the air was cool and quiet. "We need to figure this out," he said, his voice urgent. "I'm too old to play games, Elliot. And you're too important to me." "Important," I echoed, my voice breaking. I'm your son's friend. This could ruin everything. I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. But I've spent my life doing the right thing, putting everyone else first. For once, I want to be selfish. I want you. The words stole my breath. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, that I'd never felt this way about anyone. But fear clawed at me. Fear of hurting Mateo, of breaking this family I'd come to love. Before I could speak, the door swung open, and Mateo stepped out, his eyes narrowing as he saw us. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone sharp. Gabriel and I exchanged a glance, the weight of our secret pressing down. I opened my mouth, but no words came. The truth was a bomb, and I wasn't ready to detonate it. Not yet. Mateo's question hung in the air, sharp and heavy, like a blade waiting to fall. Gabriel's face was a mask of calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands flexed at his sides. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the cracked pavement of the alley and escape the weight of his gaze. "Nothing," I said, too quickly, my voice betraying me. "Just talking about the fundraiser." Mateo's eyes flicked between us, his brow furrowing. He wasn't stupid. Mateo had always been able to read me like a book. Growing up, he'd been the one to pull me out of my shell, to make me feel like I belonged in this city of dreamers and weirdos. But now, standing in the shadow of the community center, I felt like a traitor. "Whatever," he muttered, but there was an edge to his voice. "We need you inside, Dad. They're short on hands." Gabriel nodded, his eyes lingering on me for a fraction too long before he followed Mateo back inside. I stayed in the alley, my heart pounding, the cool air doing nothing to calm the storm in my chest. I'd almost told him. I'd almost let the truth spill out, consequences be damned. But the thought of losing Mateo, of shattering the only family I'd ever really had, kept the words locked inside. The fundraiser was a blur of noise and color. I threw myself into helping, carrying trays of cookies, setting up chairs, anything to keep my mind off Gabriel. But every time I turned, he was there, lifting a table, laughing with a volunteer, his presence pulling at me like gravity. I caught myself watching him, the way his sleeves hugged his arms, the way his smile softened when he thought no one was looking. Mateo noticed, too. Not the full truth, I hoped, but enough to make him quieter than usual. When we took a break to grab coffee from a vendor, he leaned against the counter, his eyes searching mine. "You okay, man? You've been weird all day." "I'm fine," I lied, sipping the bitter coffee to avoid his gaze. "Just tired." He didn't buy it, but he let it go, launching into a story about Lena's latest art project. I nodded along, grateful for the distraction, but my mind was elsewhere. It was with Gabriel, with the way he'd said, "I want you," like it was the simplest truth in the world. After the fundraiser, Mateo insisted I come back to the house for a drink. "You're not bailing on me," he said, slinging an arm around my shoulders. "We're celebrating a successful night." I should have said no. I should have gone home, locked the door, and buried myself in my sketches. But the pull of being near Gabriel was too strong, and I found myself in their living room, a beer in hand, while Mateo queued up a playlist. Gabriel was in the kitchen, cleaning up, and I could hear the clink of dishes, the soft hum of his voice as he sang along to the radio. "Go help Dad," Mateo said, sprawled on the couch. "I'm beat." My stomach twisted, but I nodded, stepping into the kitchen like I was walking into a lion's den. Gabriel looked up, his hands submerged in soapy water, and the air between us thickened. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, not looking at me. "Pretend everything's normal." "I'm not," I said, my voice barely audible. I grabbed a dish towel, standing beside him, drying the plates he handed me. Our fingers brushed, and I felt it again, that spark, that pull. I wanted to hate it, to hate him for making me feel this way, but I couldn't. "Elliot," he said, his voice low, urgent. I meant what I said. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. I set the plate down, my hands trembling. And what happens when Mateo finds out? When he hates us both? Gabriel's face softened, and for a moment, I saw the weight he carried. Not just as a father, but as a man who'd spent years putting others first. "I don't have all the answers," he said, "but I know I've never felt this way before. Not with anyone." The confession broke something in me. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, and for a reckless moment, I thought I might kiss him. But the sound of Mateo's laughter from the living room snapped me back to reality. I turned away, gripping the counter, trying to steady myself. The next week was torture. I avoided the Torres house, making excuses when Mateo texted. I threw myself into work, sketching until my hands cramped, but Gabriel was everywhere. In the lines of my drawings, in the quiet moments when I couldn't escape my thoughts. I'd always prided myself on being honest, on living my truth after years of hiding in Ohio. But this was a truth I didn't know how to face. On Friday, Mateo showed up at my apartment unannounced, his face stormy. "What's going on with you?" he demanded, pacing my tiny living room. "You're ghosting me, man. Did I do something?" "No," I said, guilt twisting in my gut. "It's not you. I'm just dealing with some stuff." "Like what?" he pressed, his eyes narrowing. "You've been weird since the fundraiser. And don't think I didn't notice you and Dad acting all secretive." My heart stopped. "It's not what you think," I said, but the words felt hollow. "Then tell me what it is," he said, his voice rising. "Because I'm not an idiot, Elliot. I see the way you look at him." The room spun. I opened my mouth to deny it, to lie, but the truth was a weight I couldn't carry anymore. "Mateo," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm sorry." His face fell, and for a moment, I thought he might hit me. But he just shook his head, his jaw tight. "You're my best friend," he said, "and he's my dad. How could you?" He stormed out, slamming the door, and I sank to the floor, my chest aching. I'd known this could happen, but the reality of it, the loss of Mateo, the only family I'd found in this city, hit me like a tidal wave. That night, I walked to the Torres house, my hands shoved in my pockets, the rain soaking through my jacket. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I couldn't stay away. Gabriel answered the door, his face etched with worry. "Mateo told me," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "He's upstairs. He's not okay." "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, my voice raw. "I tried to stop it." Gabriel's eyes softened, and he reached for me, his hand resting on my shoulder. "I know," he said, "but we can't undo what we feel." I wanted to pull away, to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't. Instead, I let him pull me into a hug, his arms strong and steady, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. "We'll figure this out," he whispered, "together." But as I stood there, wrapped in his warmth, I couldn't shake the fear that we'd already lost too much. The rain didn't stop, and neither did the ache in my chest. Standing in Gabriel's arms, I felt the world shift, safe, yet terrifying, like standing on the edge of a cliff. Mateo's hurt lingered like a ghost, and I knew we couldn't stay in this moment forever, no matter how much I wanted to. I pulled back, wiping my eyes, the rain and tears blurring together. "We need to talk to him," I said, my voice unsteady. "He deserves the truth." Gabriel nodded, his face grim. "He's angry, Elliot. I've never seen him like this." We found Mateo in his room, sitting on the edge of his bed, his guitar abandoned on the floor. He looked up as we entered, his eyes red but defiant. "So what?" he said, his voice sharp. "You're together now? My best friend and my dad." The words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to explain, to make him understand, but Gabriel spoke first. "Mateo," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I didn't plan this. Neither of us did. But I care about Elliot. More than I can explain." Mateo laughed, a bitter sound. "Care? Dad, you're twice his age. He's my friend. This isn't some rom-com. This is my life." "I know," I said, stepping forward. "And I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. You're my family, Mateo. But I love him." The words slipped out before I could stop them, raw and true. Gabriel's eyes widened, and for a moment, the room was silent, the weight of my confession settling over us. Mateo stared at me, his anger faltering, replaced by something softer. Hurt, confusion, maybe even betrayal. "You love him?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long has this been going on?" "It hasn't," Gabriel said quickly. "Not like you think. We've been figuring it out, trying to do the right thing." Mateo shook his head, standing up. "The right thing? You think sneaking around behind my back is the right thing?" He turned to me, his eyes blazing. "And you, Elliot, I trusted you. I brought you into our home, and this is what you do." "I'm sorry," I said again, my voice breaking. "I tried to fight it. I did." He didn't respond, just grabbed his jacket and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The sound echoed in my chest, a reminder of everything I stood to lose. The next few days were a blur. Mateo didn't answer my texts, and Gabriel said he was staying with Lena, needing space. I went through the motions at work, selling paintbrushes and canvases, but my mind was elsewhere. Every sketch I drew turned into Gabriel, his eyes, his hands, the way he made me feel seen. I'd grown up hiding who I was, shrinking myself to fit into a world that didn't want me. Portland had been my escape, a place where I could be out, be proud. But loving Gabriel felt like stepping back into the shadows, not because of who we were, but because of what it could cost us. On Wednesday, Gabriel called me. "Can you come over?" he asked, his voice tight. "Mateo's here. He wants to talk." I arrived at the house, my stomach in knots. Mateo was in the living room, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Gabriel stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, looking like he was bracing for a storm. "I don't get it," Mateo said, breaking the silence. "I've been trying to wrap my head around this, but I don't. You're my dad, and you're gay." Gabriel took a deep breath. "I've always known I was attracted to men," he said quietly. "But after your mom left, I focused on you, on being the father you needed. I didn't think I'd ever find someone who made me want to risk that. Until Elliot." Mateo's eyes flicked to me, and I saw the hurt there, raw and unguarded. "And you?" he asked. "You're okay with this? With breaking up our family?" "I don't want to break anything," I said, my voice shaking. "You and your dad, you're the closest thing I've ever had to a family. But I can't help how I feel. I love him, Mateo. And I love you too. I don't want to lose either of you." He didn't say anything for a long moment, his jaw tight. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I need time," he said. "I'm not saying I'm okay with this. But I'm not ready to lose you either." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. That night, Gabriel and I sat on the porch, the rain a soft patter against the awning. We didn't touch, didn't speak, just sat there, letting the quiet hold us. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, a chance that we could find a way through this, together. "I've spent my life being careful," Gabriel said, breaking the silence. "Trying to do right by Mateo, by everyone. But you make me want to be brave. I turned to him, my heart swelling. You make me feel like I'm enough, I said. Like I don't have to prove anything. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine, and for a moment, the world felt right. But the shadow of Mateo's hurt lingered, a reminder that love, even when it felt like everything, came with a cost. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Mateo didn't shut me out completely, but our friendship wasn't the same. He'd text me about practical things, work, the community center, but the easy laughter, the late-night talks were gone. I missed him, the way you miss a part of yourself you didn't know you needed until it's gone. Gabriel and I were careful, meeting in quiet corners of the city. A coffee shop in northeast Portland, a park by the Willamette River. Every moment with him felt stolen, precious, like we were holding our breath, waiting for the world to catch up. One evening, we sat in a diner, the neon sign buzzing outside. Gabriel reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. I want to do this right, he said. No more hiding. But I need to know you're in this, Elliot. Really in. I am, I said, my voice steady despite the fear in my chest. But, Mateo, I'll talk to him, Gabriel said. He's my son. I owe him that. The idea of Gabriel telling Mateo everything, laying it all bare, terrified me. But it also felt like a step toward something real, something we could build together. Mateo agreed to meet us at the house a few days later. He sat on the couch, his arms crossed, his face a mix of defiance and exhaustion. Gabriel took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. I love Elliot, he said, the words simple but heavy. I didn't expect this, and I know it's complicated, but I'm not going to pretend it's not real. Mateo's eyes flicked to me, then back to his dad. And what about me? He asked, his voice raw. Where do I fit in this? You're my son, Gabriel said, his voice breaking. You'll always come first. But I can't keep living half a life, Mateo. I've done that for too long. Mateo didn't respond, just stared at the floor. I wanted to reach out, to tell him I'd walk away if it meant keeping him in my life, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Love wasn't a switch I could turn off. Finally, Mateo looked up, his eyes wet. I need to know you're not going to disappear, he said, his voice barely audible. Either of you. We're not going anywhere, I said, my throat tight. I promise. He nodded, a small, reluctant gesture, and left the room. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall between us. As spring turned to summer, Gabriel and I found a rhythm. We were still careful around Mateo, but we started to build something real. Dinners together, walks through the city, quiet nights where we'd talk about everything and nothing. I showed him my sketches, and he'd tell me stories about his life, about raising Mateo, about the dreams he'd put on hold. One night, we sat on a blanket in Laurelhurst Park, the stars bright above us. I used to think love was supposed to be easy, I said, leaning against his shoulder. But it's worth the fight. Gabriel smiled, his hand finding mine. You're worth it, he said. All of it. But even as we grew closer, the weight of Mateo's uncertainty lingered. He was trying, I could see it, inviting me over, joking with me like old times. But there was a distance there, a hurt we hadn't fully bridged. One afternoon, I was at the community center, helping with an art workshop for kids. Mateo showed up, unexpected, his guitar slung over his shoulder. Thought I'd play for the kids, he said, his tone casual but his eyes searching. We worked side by side, him strumming soft chords, me guiding little hands with paintbrushes. Felt like us again, like the days before everything changed. When the workshop ended, he pulled me aside. I'm trying, he said, his voice low. I don't get it, not completely. But I see how happy you make him. And I don't want to lose you, Elliot. Tears stung my eyes, and I hugged him, hard. You won't, I said. I swear. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for the first time, I believed we might find a way through this, all three of us. Summer in Portland was a kaleidoscope of color, food carts, street fairs, the river sparkling under the sun. Gabriel and I leaned into our relationship, no longer hiding, though we were still careful around Mateo. We'd go to art galleries, share coffee in quiet cafes, and steal kisses in the shadow of the city's bridges. Every moment with him felt like a gift, a reminder that love could be messy and complicated, but still beautiful. Mateo was coming around, slowly. He'd join us for dinner sometimes, his laughter a little less forced each time. One night, he even teased Gabriel about his terrible taste in music, and for a moment it felt like we were a family again. Not the same as before, but something new, something we were building together. But life, as I'd learned, never lets you get too comfortable. One evening, as Gabriel and I walked back from a movie, he got a call from his sister, Rosa, who lived in Seattle. Their mother had fallen ill, and Gabriel needed to go to her. "I'll be back in a week," he said, packing a bag in his bedroom. "Maybe less." I nodded, trying to hide the anxiety twisting in my gut. "I'll keep an eye on Mateo," I said, half joking. Gabriel smiled, pulling me close. "I love you," he said, the word still new, still thrilling. "I love you too," I whispered, kissing him softly. While Gabriel was gone, I spent more time with Mateo, trying to rebuild what we'd lost. We worked on a mural for the community center, our hands covered in paint, laughing like we used to. One afternoon, as we sat on the grass outside, he turned to me, his expression serious. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared that you and Dad being together meant I'd lose you both. But I see it now. The way you look at each other. It's real." I swallowed hard, my heart swelling. "You're not going to lose us," I said. "Ever." He nodded, and for the first time in months, I saw the old Mateo, the one who'd welcomed me into his life without hesitation. Gabriel returned a week later, his mother stable but needing care. He looked tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. That night, we cooked dinner together in the kitchen where it all began, the air filled with the scent of garlic and possibility. Mateo joined us, and for the first time we felt like a unit, not perfect but whole. As we ate, Gabriel reached for my hand under the table, his thumb brushing my knuckles. Mateo caught the gesture and rolled his eyes, but there was a smile there, small but real. "You two are gross," he said, but there was no venom in his voice. Gabriel laughed, and I felt the last piece of my heart settle into place. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I first stepped into this kitchen, when Gabriel's presence had turned my world upside down. But it was better, messy, complicated, and ours. Months later, we stood together at the community center's annual Pride event, rainbow flags waving in the breeze. Gabriel's arm was around my shoulders, Mateo beside us, his guitar slung over his back. The crowd was a sea of color, of love in all its forms, and I felt it. The truth that love wasn't about fitting into someone else's story. It was about writing your own, no matter how hard the words were to find. Gabriel leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. "You changed everything," he whispered. I smiled, my heart full. "So did you." And as we stood there, surrounded by the people we loved, I knew that this, our messy, beautiful, hard-won family, was worth every moment of doubt, every fear, every fight. Because love, real love, doesn't just change you. It builds you, piece by piece, into something stronger than you ever thought you could be.